Welcome into K-State Online. I am Mason Voth. That is Drew Galloway, a Wednesday edition of the KSO show for everybody. We've talked about running back to start the week and then quarterback receiver yesterday. And we kind of keep working our way through some of the things that have an impact over the course of a season and how you remember a season. Because that's the other thing that we've realized as we go through and talk about all these quarterbacks, and we'll have more that we discuss later on this week. But if you go and look at kind of who pops up, and you think, we know that 8-4 seasons are not created equally. Like some 8-4 years, you take it, you don't complain about it. Other times, you can go 9-3, 10-2, and maybe have some complaints about how things ended up working out. Like K-State, you think about the Big 12 title season in 2022. Like if they don't win the Big 12 title, that season probably is thought of differently because that ends up being a team that they'd be 9-5 would be their final record. Because they were still, once they made it to Arlington, they were guaranteed to go to the Sugar Bowl because TCU was going to be in the playoff regardless. So 9-5 would have felt a lot differently. And then that Tulane loss stings a little bit more. The loss, to Texas and to TCU in the regular season, like all of those, you just go, man, what? And you look at really a lot of the Chris Kleiman seasons. I think more times than not, the option has been there for K-State has left wins on the table. There have been very few years where they've stolen some wins that they don't necessarily deserve or should have had. Like think of 2023 when K-State basically every single game they either lost or they blew their opponent out. The only one score win that they had in 2023 was the game in Lawrence against KU. But outside of that, it was, beating the brakes off of TCU and Houston at home and, whoever else. And then the losses like heartbreaker against Missouri, heartbreaker against Texas, one score against Oklahoma State, one score in the snow against Iowa State. Like it's just kind of repeated where we've seen that now. And I think people are always waiting for that shoe to drop with Chris Kleiman teams. I have dubbed them the Kleiman clunkers. Because look, I think more people would be surprised if you just looked at every team in college football at how often a good team loses a stupid game. We kind of talked about this after K-State lost to Houston last year. Now we realize it kind of ended up being a bigger problem for K-State as they went through the month of November and were 1-3. But like I think generally not many teams get through their entire season, one, unbeaten, and number two, without one of those losses where you go, how did that happen? I mean, it happens. It happens, unfortunately.
There's probably only like 4 or 5 teams in college football that like avoids that game.
Yeah. It's unfortunate. It's not fun to think about. And teams should still win those games, but it's just kind of how the thing works. I mean, if you go through and look at how games played out last season, like Ole Miss lost to Kentucky. Georgia very easily could have lost to Kentucky. Kentucky was 4-8 last season. They only won one game in the SEC. It came against Ole Miss, who was a fringe playoff team, and they lost by 1 point to Georgia, 13-12. Like, very easily could have gone the other way. And those teams, again, were top 10, top 15 teams all season.
Yeah. When you look across college football, it's not like a huge deal. It's just frustrating because there are times where it feels like weird weather is involved in some of them. And like the games just like feel very odd. Like the Iowa State game in 2023, I think was kind of the clunker. If you really look at it, because we all kind of thought that Missouri might be a clunker, but Missouri ends up winning a New Year's Six Bowl and being a very, very good team.
But back-to-back years with non-conference losses where you go at the time like, oh my gosh, this is terrible. And then both those teams won the Cotton Bowl.
Yeah, and then those teams end up being really good. So like you look at that in the Iowa State game, number one, most snow I've ever seen in one day in my entire life. It so then that was weird. Then the fact that, like, neither team could stop each other, but K-State couldn't get, like, the big play, but Iowa State was just
Yeah.
rattling off big plays like it was nothing. So that weird. Then you had the weird weather of the Houston game this past year where, again, up there with most rain I've ever seen in one day. And it was just a downpour the whole day, and neither team could really do anything offensively. But again, big play, big turnover by K-State results in a Houston win. 2022, not weird weather, but like you just that was like the low point that I think that you needed to see with Adrian Martinez. Like that I think was kind of just how it went there. 2021, there's a reason that Courtney Messingham is no longer the offensive coordinator at K-State and wasn't after that game. That was unbelievable. Like I have legitimately never seen something quite like that. Arkansas State is a tough one on here. Like
Yeah.
Arkansas State was really bad in 2020, but like if you really dive in to like who K-State had available for that game, K-State had like 5 receivers total that could play. And a lot of them, it was like their first time really in the spotlight. And Arkansas State kind of had the benefit of they had already played a game during the 2020 season beforehand. It's like that's just a tough one because we've talked about it at length that 2020, when you really look at it, is so different than a lot of other seasons. 2019, I think, is probably the most inexcusable of the ones on this list. Like that West Virginia team was terrible. K-State
Yeah.
scored with ease on their first drive and then just didn't really get anything going after that. So you really look at this, like there were a lot of poor performances in these games, but like we've talked about though, it's just no different really than any other college football team. It's just magnified because we are so entranced with the K-State world. And like again, like even the Tulane one, like they were a really really good team. Yeah, and
And a really good offense. Like,
yeah,
I mean, Spencer Pratt was a good quarterback. Tyjae Spears is an NFL running back. Like, they they were legit, and that was just, I think both teams. It was a tough day for them, and it was miserably hot in that game. And like you said, that was the game for Adrian Martinez, where it was okay because we had kind of realized like the South Dakota Missouri games, the offense wasn't fantastic. Like I was watching parts of it today to go and find Jake Rubley highlights for coming
they
up
were
later in the week.
they were
The
kind of
final
winning
score of
it
that game
by
was 34-0. Like, and we were freaking out last year when K-State only scored 45 on UT Martin. Like
yeah.
it's one of those where you can see where there were issues, but then this one it smacked you in the face, and that was where it was basically, probably that final chance and opportunity for Adrian Martinez where he had to go out and do something against Oklahoma, and he obviously did, and it set him on the right course before he got hurt. Here's what I would say on this is when you look at those games on there, 2020 is the weird one. I still don't think it should have happened. I get it. COVID, everything's kind of crazy. That makes it a little bit more understandable. I mean, Skylar Thompson wasn't hurt yet. He was still playing. I like you should have found a way. There should have been a way for that team to win that game, and they lost it at home. But I can get it. The other ones you go and look though, because we know 2020 was a crappy season. K-State won 8 games in 2019, despite losing to West Virginia, who they shouldn't have, and losing their bowl game to Navy. 2021, they managed to win 8 games, despite, that Texas loss, and they had some other ugly ones in there. 2022, we know what happens. They win 10 games. They win the Big 12. So that one doesn't hurt as much. But then you look 23 and 24, those are teams, once again, that finished the year with 9 wins. And you can easily look across the schedule and not only say, okay, it probably should have been a 10-win season, but also like there were a couple of games throughout those seasons where if K-State just shows up and doesn't have these deficiencies, not only are they winning double-digit games, but they're also playing in Arlington for a Big 12 title. And I think that's where like this stands out more. Every team has stuff like this that happens.
They do tend to happen in like a crappy situation.
But for Chris Kleiman and K-State, it's because they have been so consistent and so good that when K-State loses these games, it's going to hurt a whole lot more. Like there are teams out there that would have won anywhere between 5 and 7 games last season that you will find the same thing on their schedule where you would look around and you would go, how the heck did this happen? But it doesn't really matter in the grand scheme for them, or it may not hurt as much because they were a 5 to 7 win team. And that's kind of what they do. What makes it so odd is that like we see where K-State can be on some of this stuff. And it like they have what are good seasons that again, you know, big picture, you're not complaining about Chris Kleiman averaging 8.5 wins every year because that's what he's doing right now at K-State in regular season. A little over that, I guess it would be at this point because he's got more. So, like, that's fine and everything. But, like, K-State's a good team where some of these things change. The season feels totally different and becomes, you know, they're on the precipice of being a great team. But I think that's where it sticks out too. Like, it's so much of what gets Chris Kleiman heat from fans right now is because of the success that he's had and consistently created at K-State. You know, like the 8-win comment that people were pissed off about last year after the Iowa State game. Again, number one, they were, you know, totally being irrational and not being fair in any way in how you consumed that comment, because that was not Chris Kleiman saying, oh, I'm cool with just winning 8 games every year. What he was laying out there is it isn't easy to win 8 games every single season in college football because there aren't many teams that do it. I mean, you can go and look around the teams in the Big 12 that you would have thought were in good standing that in, you know, Chris Kleiman and the 5 full seasons he's got, screw COVID. We all know that that was a wash and a fake phony season in any sport. You know, you want to talk about LeBron James won the NBA finals with the Lakers in the COVID year. Fake. You know, Wichita State made the NCAA tournament in the COVID year, won their conference over Houston. Fake. Like, we just can go down and down and down and down the line and look at all these and say, it doesn't matter really. It counts for you. Congratulations on your accolades, but it doesn't count. Like, Chris Kleiman has been able to keep this consistency. You know who didn't do it last year? Mike Gundy in Oklahoma State, Kyle Whittingham in Utah over this same stretch, where there would have been times where you thought there's no way that's possible. And then you'd say, well, you know, they had quarterback problems. Chris Kleiman's had quarterback problems in basically every single season he's been at K-State, except last year, because Avery Johnson was good enough to not bring those into question. And number 2, there was nobody good enough behind him for that to be a problem. But you think like 23, you got some real stinky Will Howard, and quarterback was a problem. 2022, Adrian Martinez struggled to start the year. Then he got good. Then he got hurt. Will Howard comes in. Then Adrian comes back. Then he gets hurt again, and Will Howard still wins you a Big 12 championship. 2021, Skylar Thompson, he's hurt. Like, the losses in 2021, you want to talk about a team that you think about it, like K-State straight up lost to Baylor. Like, they were getting beat, but they had the ball with an opportunity to do some things. Skylar Thompson got hurt in that game. Skylar Thompson came back from injury against Oklahoma and almost beat the Sooners in Manhattan, but they lost to Oklahoma State because of it. Like, you just can go down the line. Like, that highlights the difficulties it takes to win at least 8 games every year. And that's where, you know, the knee-jerk reaction doesn't need to be, oh, well, they didn't win 9, 10, 11 games this year. I don't like the direction of all this, whatever. There's a way where that would be true, but not in this set of circumstances that K-State is in. Like, they have had their good years, and you're in a league right now where it's not likely that any one team is going to dominate it. If you're looking for what success in the Big 12 is going to look like, it's not going to be somebody coming in and being Oklahoma over the course of a decade plus and just winning everything. It's going to be when you get a good nucleus of players you have a 2 to 4 year window where you feel like you're, the king of the league. So like right now, K-State has that opportunity where Avery Johnson has 2 years of eligibility left. Jace Brown has 2 years of eligibility left. Dylan Edwards has 2 years of eligibility left. You have a bunch of offensive linemen that have a couple of years left on them. Good young talent coming up. K-State needs to think about dominating the next 2 years. So like
Yeah,
if K-State
but
wins 8 regular season games this year, we're having a different conversation about it. But like
oh yeah,
that's to bring this all back together. That's why I think the clunkers that K-State produces stick out so much to people, and why you think, oh, it's going to happen. It's going to happen again, is because Chris Kleiman and K-State have been so good and so consistent that it's uncharacteristic for them to have that one game, because basically the other 11 games that they play over the course of a season, you don't think that a team like that can possibly get to that level, like of how bad they are, but they have. And it's shocking when it happens. Like they didn't show up against BYU last year. Now, little odd circumstance there. That's why, it's clear that the Houston game was more along the lines of what we're talking about than BYU. You can justify that a little bit more because K-State dominated the first half of that game. It just got a little wonky on them. But
I think that the next step for Chris Kleiman and K-State is to win the games they're supposed to, because they do a good job for the most part of winning the games that they're supposed to. But then you'll run into kind of like the situations like Houston last year or West Virginia in 2019. So that is just like that next step, because like you've pointed out, like if K-State wins that Iowa State game or the Houston game last year, like we're talking about K-State going on a 3-year stretch where they've won 10 games.
yeah. Yeah. And look, you look at the opportunities that are there, and some of these seasons, like it's a couple wins they're leaving out there. Like we talked about, their losses are one score losses. I mean, the only game that K-State has been, score wise manhandled in was Arizona State last year. Over the last 3 seasons, the loss outside of the Sugar Bowl with Alabama, the only loss that's been by more than a score was the Arizona State game last year, where K-State, like it became apparent in that moment that they had a problem, that they had to get it figured out. But like Houston, they could have won. Iowa State last year, Iowa State the year before, Texas, they went to overtime with in 2023. Like just all of these games, even the losses, they've been in them. And that's why, like, whenever I say it a lot, I write it a lot, but K-State, in my eyes, they're the ones that dictate if they win or lose games. I don't view it as, they're not going to face anybody on their schedule this coming season that is going to dictate what happens in the game. K-State is going to be the sole conductor of their success or failure. And it's the same story for last year. It was the same story for the year before that. And you look back at it in 2022, basically the same story there, even though we didn't know it at the time, with teams like Oklahoma and, TCU on the schedule, where Oklahoma ended up being worse. TCU ended up being a little bit better. But we know that K-State, over the 8 quarters and overtime that they played, both games, I thought K-State was the better football team.
I mean, there's a legitimate chance that K-State is favored in every game going into this season. Yeah, and they were favorites, I believe, in every game besides the game in Ames last year.
Yeah.
So like that just kind of proves a point there. I'll pose a fun hypothetical for you while we're talking about like hypotheticals and stuff. Does K-State win the Big 12 in 2022 without a loss to Tulane?
It's a good question.
I think I lean towards no.
It does feel like Adrian Martinez needed that kick in the butt, shot in the arm, whatever you want to call it, to, Chris Kleiman referred to it as they told him that he needed to cut it loose going into that Oklahoma game. And then it looked like it. And I have no problem thinking that K-State wins the Big 12, whether it's Adrian Martinez or Will Howard at quarterback that season. It's easier to say it now. Like looking back, we know that they did it. So it's like, yeah, of course they needed it. But I think because things didn't seem to change based off the first 2 games, and you could kind of tell that it was stinky football offensively against South Dakota and Missouri, but because they won by such big margins, it didn't seem like that problem was fully addressed head on. And then it really had to bottom out and give them a wake up call that, like, scoring 10 points and losing at home to, again, at the time, they were just a team from the American Athletic Conference, is inexcusable. So I think that had to happen. And that's where you're going to look at this coming season for K-State and say, did what took place in the Houston and Arizona State games last year, where they thought the offensive line was getting their butt kicked because they were worn out, was that needed to be the catalyst for them to possibly make it to Arlington this season? Which means I'm going to flip this back to you, Drew. Does K-State avoid the ugly loss in 2025, the one where, you're sitting there and you're like, third quarter starting to not get great feelings, but it's still close, and K-State may even have the lead, so you're like, well, they might sneak this one out? Basically the feelings that I had in Houston last year. I'm like, this is getting ugly and not fun, but I mean they could still yank this one. Do they avoid it in 2025?
And I'm going to lean towards yes, because it's so hard to think, like, right now, like, who the ugly loss could be against.
All right, well, let me paint the picture for you in this. I don't think
there's one that really stands out to me that, like, really
like they're
scares me.
asking for it.
It just scares me from, like, a scheduling standpoint. Are we thinking of the same one?
I'm guessing you're talking week 2 against Army.
Oh, no.
Okay.
My scheduling.
Oh, one of the late November games against O-State or Utah?
Oh, I'm still not even there, because
man.
my like, scheduling factor feels like it could be an ugly kind of game, even though I think that this team might be terrible, which brings in the ugly loss.
Final non-con game? Yeah.
Yeah. Because that's just a game where we've seen teams go on the road on a Friday night and look horrible. And the fact that game is also going to be probably an after dark game, I would imagine. That we will know the maturity of this K-State team if they go in and handle their business at Arizona. The other thing, like, kind of with that game that also kind of leads into, like, could that be the ugly loss? Like, K-State will have 4 games under their belt after that game is over, and, like, that leads into that first bye week. Are they kind of caught napping if they are undefeated at that point? What would make that loss even uglier is, like, if you lose in Ireland and then lose to Arizona. So, like, that will be kind of like a weird kind of measuring stick of where K-State is, not even because of the team that they're playing, but going on the road on a Friday night, playing in the after dark spot just feels like a not great feeling.
It's because they weren't very good on the road last year. Like, they won at Tulane, but this was not 2022 Tulane, and it took them over a half to get it figured out. And you look back on it and go, it took a Austin Romaine forced fumble and Jack Fabris taking it back to the end zone for the win to happen there. Also an interception in the end zone, and, like, all this other stuff that took place. The BYU game obviously was not pretty. They had the 2-week stretch against Colorado and West Virginia, where now you look back on what took place basically from October on last year, and you go, how did they do that? Where they beat, a legit Colorado team on the road in that after dark kickoff window, and then they just showed up and beat the crap out of West Virginia. And then we know they just barely got through Kansas, and I think got lucky that K-State was on their way down and KU was on their way up, but it wasn't that KU they hadn't fully leveled off yet. And then, Houston, Arizona State were disasters, and Iowa State, they lose by a score, and they had moments in that game, but the offense never felt fully clean. So here's how I would identify this, because there are certainly the games, like like the list that I have shown here. Some of these teams on here absolutely sucked. Others of them were good teams, but it's all about the circumstance too. It's not just about who you lose to. It's how you lose to them, when you lose to them. So like West Virginia at home, that team didn't go to a bowl game. Jarrett Dagey making his first career start, terrible. Arkansas State 2020, COVID circumstances, yeah, we get it, but you lost at home to a Sun Belt school to open your season, and then you went on the road and beat Oklahoma a week later. Like, and that's not like that was that was not a bad Oklahoma team that season. So then, Texas Black Friday, again, this is a circumstance thing. That wasn't a great Texas team, but you could watch the game and evaluate and go, nope, this was terrible by K-State. Tulane, K-State, again, bad offense, all that. Iowa State, we know the weather contributed. We know that the defense was terrible. Iowa State was a team that in reality should have been 2 to 3 games worse than K-State in 2023. And I think they ended up being only like a game worse in how the season finished up with win totals, and then last year with Houston. But there are other games on here that were candidates to me that we could have identified and said those were crappy games. Those were clunkers too. Like BYU last year would have gotten consideration for that. Arizona State, you come home after an embarrassing loss and off a bye week and you lose 24-14. Not great. 2023, the Oklahoma State game, you come out, Will Howard throws 3 interceptions. Not very pretty. The Iowa State game was a part of that. Then you can go through and look, like 2021, Skylar was back and healthy. You had a bye week. You had almost beaten Oklahoma the last time out, and you lose by 13 to Iowa State. In the very first play of the game, all they do is just turn around and hand it to Breece Hall, and he's gone. Terrible. Then the Texas game was thrown in there. 2019, the West Virginia one's the one that sticks out as the most embarrassing and terrible, but K-State also had essentially no shows against Oklahoma State and Baylor in back-to-back weeks after coming off that road win at Mississippi State. So, it happens a little bit more, and that's where I say, some of those teams in there, like Baylor and Oklahoma State, were not bad teams in 2019, but K-State's performance was of a level that was just so bad. So I have some candidates to where I would consider not only this happening this year, but here's the picture to be painted of why they would be bad. So you have to start week 0 with Iowa State. Iowa State is going to be a good football team, but K-State's last regular season game came against Iowa State. It didn't look very pretty at times. And if Chris Kleiman loses this game to Iowa State, he drops to 2-5 against the Cyclones. It's a lot different if he's 3-4. And again, we know one of those was the COVID year that I continue to contend was a wash. But here's why it would make sense. The offense could come out and not look very good. You move the game from home to Ireland, and now you're playing at week 0. So you're playing it even a week earlier than you would normally be ready to play a season. This one will be a lot more about fan perception than what maybe the actual reality of K-State is as a team. But if K-State loses in Ireland and it's not just you realize, oh man, these teams are going back and forth. They both look good. It was clean. Can't fault them for how that worked out. It's going to go on there with it. Then I already mentioned Army is on there. I still scratch my head. I want to know who made that decision, why they thought that was the right move, because we know that Chris Kleiman and K-State didn't enjoy playing Navy in the Liberty Bowl, and here they are once again having to play a service academy, and now this game actually matters in terms of your regular season. It's there.
I will say Army does lose a lot from last year.
Yeah. No, that's true. It's just the fear would be there for a lot of people. That'll be like an 11 a.m. game or something. So it's going to get played in the middle of the day, and people are just going to be sitting there in the heat going, oh my gosh, what's going on here? It could happen. Arizona, as you mentioned, would be a candidate on there. Then the next one's I'm not worried about K-State in their Big 12 opener at home against UCF. The road game at Baylor's a legit team. So that's one of those where you would look at it and say, yeah, there's a world where if K-State goes down there and scores 0 points or something, terrible performance, complete no-show. But if they lose that game, more likely than not, I think it's just going to be because we realize that Baylor's legit. They'll come home and face TCU. I'm not buying the TCU hype that a lot of people are trying to sell. Road game at Kansas. Look, K-State could lose it, but I don't think that that's one where you worry about how into it they are, and they're going to be prepared. They're also coming off of a bye week there, which I know concerns some with Chris Kleiman. But again, I think that's another thing that maybe it's just kind of random and not necessarily a trend that means much. The Texas Tech game, I won't throw that in there. But then I thought like the back-to-back road games in mid-November, Oklahoma State and Utah, that'll get a little dicey, a little scary. We talked about it last year with K-State, like in back-to-back seasons now, they've had these road games butt up against each other where it was Colorado and West Virginia, where for like the travel purposes of that seems to be a crappy situation. And this year, same type of deal where both these teams could be really bad or they could be good again. They have proven head coaches, and you're walking into back-to-back weeks of really tough places to play if those teams are good. And then end of the year at home against Colorado. Maybe Colorado's good this year. I'm just going to doubt it. And I'm not worried about K-State closing out their finale at home because Chris Kleiman has been pretty good in those to finish out home games at the end of the year. So those are the ones I would put out there as the candidates. My answer to the question, I think it probably happens just because.
Hater.
Well, yeah. Look, if K-State, if it doesn't happen, in this reality, K-State should probably win almost every game, but they're not going to win every game because it just doesn't happen in college football. Even the best teams at K-State have not won every game. So then you look at it and say, like we talked about off the top, this is just kind of how teams lose games more times than not, where if you're a good to great team and you lose, it's probably because you did something poorly and not because the other team was good and in that circumstance. And it's happened enough times to where, not that I necessarily think it's something that is just like a blind spot for Chris Kleiman and K-State, but it just seems to happen to him. So I don't know when or where it happens, but I think you're probably bound to see one of those games, because if you avoid what would be deemed just an ugly loss where you play like crap and it looks like crap, then K-State's going to be really freaking good this year. And they are going to Arlington, and they maybe have one loss on their resume. It's just probably not going to shake out that way. The Big 12, all these teams now, this is the other thing we've talked about. All these teams in the Big 12 are going to have, for the most part, similar talent levels that are on the roster. And so it's tough to get separation. And that's why even, K-State can lose to Houston, because at the end of the day, like, you can go look at how it is. We know Houston was a bad team. Obviously, they fired Dana Holgerson and they brought in Willie Fritz, but like, Fritz was a good coach. Those are players that, like, there's still talent there. A lot of the talent that's in the Big 12 right now, it comes down to really the coaching staff they have. So how well are you coached up? And then also, what is the scheme that you're in? Is that going to fit you? And that's why, like, it's going to happen. A lot of these teams are going to have losses that you just go, shouldn't have happened. It doesn't make sense why it took place. I mean, go and look last season at what Arizona State did. They lost to Texas Tech, their first Big 12 game. They were on the road there. And then they lost at Cincinnati. Now, Jeff Sims had to start that game, but still, they lost to Cincinnati. And that's one where, I mean, think of the Cincinnati team that we saw K-State play last year.
It was pretty ugly.
Taquan Roberson would have won that game at quarterback for K-State because DJ Giddens, he had been worn down to that point. He came back to life in that game and was nuts. Cam Scatterby ran for only 75 yards in the game against Cincinnati. Like, it happened to them. We talk about like, there's luck involved in this. Iowa State last year, they go to the Big 12 title game. They lost back-to-back weeks at home to Texas Tech and at Kansas. And they easily, the week before they lost to Tech, could have lost at home to UCF. So it happens to all these, and they almost lost to Utah too. Like, it happens so often, and it just is about, if you can have the season where the football gods look upon you and you eke it out, and it just, the luck's on your side. And K-State is probably due for some of the luck to be on their side this season.
It is probably more likely that it happens than doesn't, but in my world right now, I'm just going to say that it doesn't happen.
I appreciate that because I think I had that point of view 2 years ago, I
Yeah,
believe. What, two or
but
last year? One of the years I had never been a guy that was like, K-State's winning every one of these games. But I had one of those where I was like, K-State's winning every one of these games. And then they didn't, and they lost 4 games. So that's why I have to use my head and not my
well, I
heart
don't
or
think that,
whatever other
I
part of
don't think
my
that
gut.
I don't think that they win every game, but I think that they win all the games that they probably should.
So you think it's more likely than not that like the losses. Well, right now, I mean, this weighs out here, but how many losses do you think K-State has at the end of the regular season?
I'd say maybe 2. Like
So you would think that the losses would probably be in that scenario
like
at
Baylor.
Baylor, and then any combination of probably Tech, Iowa State. Like who else would play in this scenario where they avoid the ugly loss?
Well, I'm a believer in Utah right now, so like
Okay,
that would be the other team that's
okay,
mixed in
that's
there.
fair. That makes sense. Devin Dampier guy.
Oh yeah, I mean I guess if you're
Yeah, I
gonna
guess you got to be if you're going to be a Utah guy right now.
yeah, I'm kind of stuck in that, but it's fine.
Wait, so why do you believe in Utah if you don't like their quarterback?
I I think I think Dampier is good. It's just more of like a I think that like Kyle Whittingham is too good to not figure it out.
Okay. Well,
I mean, we
at
just talked
some
about how
point,
we just talked about how they should have beat Iowa State last year, and they were terrible.
yeah. Well, that probably has more to do with how Iowa State played in that game than Utah. Because, Utah scored 28 points in that game, and they went a long time without scoring that many in every other game. So, like, I don't know. Let's look at Utah last year when they scored 28 against Iowa State. They had scored the last time that Utah had scored 28 points prior to that game against Iowa State was back on September 14th when they
If
beat
I
Utah State 38-21.
if I remember right, Iowa State had a lot of turnovers in that game.
Yeah, I think there was weird stuff that happened in that game. But again, that's where we talk about like how does your luck play out? How does it work in your favor? Yeah, Iowa State lost a fumble. Rocco threw a pick. So it matters. And then what happens when you get like, if you think of K-State in the BYU game last year, the turnovers happen in parts of the field that you absolutely don't want it to happen. And then BYU added a little bit extra on top of it. The punt happens, which is like a 1 in 100 type of play punt that gets taken back for a touchdown. There's some randomness. There's some luck that's involved. It's also there are things that you can control and be a little bit better at. And that's why when we talk about like Avery Johnson and Jace Brown yesterday, those guys are more experienced. They should be able to avoid some of the things that put them in that position last season. You'd also would hope that Matt Wells is a more experienced offensive coordinator. He's been the head coach of a Big 12 football team before. Maybe his guidance is going to be a little bit better than what Connor Riley had leading the offense last year. Sorry, Scott, not a slight to Connor Riley, just reality that like there are probably some blind spots that Connor Riley had in his first and only season as an offensive coordinator that Matt Wells might be better equipped to handle. So I don't know. We'll just see how it plays out. But I know it's a fascinating point of conversation because I think a lot of fans subscribe to the bad game that's coming, and we'll see if K-State is able to not put another team on this graphic. And we're not talking about this next offseason. One of the games that we discussed as being a possible clunker candidate, that would be the 2025 Aer Lingus College Football Classic. You can visit cats2ireland.com for your travel and ticket info. You can also get more insight into what you need to do to get over there if you go to kstatesports.com. As we are just over 3 months from the game kicking off, we learned yesterday that K-State and Iowa State will be televised on ESPN, an 11 a.m. kick time here in Kansas. That'll be 5 p.m. over in Dublin. Getting a TV and a start time just made it feel a little bit more exciting yesterday. It added a little bit more to it where now it's like, okay, we're really getting close.
It did make it feel a lot closer.
Yeah. Ireland fun fact before we get out of here, Drew.
Uh, See, I have some debates on this of like because I'm doing kind of like an opinion fun fact.
Okay.
But IMDb says that Colin Farrell is the most famous Irish like person in TV.
Hmm. What would I know Colin Farrell from? Other
Uh,
than I know he played the Penguin in the new Robert Pattinson Batman.
Horrible Bosses.
Never seen it.
Oh well, that's immediately a killer. Let's look here.
Now, this I would say this is a good sign for Colin Farrell that when you go to his Wikipedia page, that his filmography has its own separate page. You know that somebody's is big time if in the acting world, if it doesn't
Oh yeah.
just show up on like a drop down tab, you have to go to its own page. So I guess that's
Have you
fine.
seen the have you seen the Fantastic Beasts movies?
No, no. See,
No.
I couldn't get on board with those J.K. Rowling cash grabs. I read
It's
all
more than that.
I read all 7 books, all 6 when I was in 3rd grade, and then that summer after the 7th one came out, read them all, loved them as a 3rd and 4th grader. That love has not transcended time. Like, when I was around that same age is when I started watching Star Wars, like Indiana Jones. Star Wars and Indiana Jones come on, I'm still like, I want to watch this movie. If I see a Harry Potter movie, I'm like, no, not for me anymore. That time's gone out the window. So I did not see the Fantastic Beast movie because, like I said, cash grab, not my Harry Potter.
Right. He was also in where did it go that I think that you might have seen Total Recall.
Never seen it. No.
Have you seen any movies on here?
I'm looking at his movies that he's been in. Not really that I can see popping up on here.
No,
No,
that's
didn't
crazy.
see that.
I've seen him in like 3 or 4 things that are on here.
Hmm. Okay, I'm still going through. As always, I know good TV, good radio. When somebody's just scrolling through a list, telling them to
By the
snooze the
way,
right time.
since this is coming out today, I can I guess talk about this while you're scrolling. In the K-State Fantasy Legends team draft, I lost by 2 votes.
Oh, that's painful.
I would have rather lost by like 80% to 20 than it was the final tally was like
Yeah.
78 votes to 76.
Okay, I need to go do something, Drew.
Okay.
I I don't know that I actually voted in yours. I need to go see if I.
Oh.
Okay, I did. I did. Don't
Okay.
worry. I did. The check mark shows that I voted for you. I got to thinking about that. I was like, I remember seeing it. I know that I voted in one of the others where I don't remember who it was, but I was like, this jokester put together a terrible team. And I was like, I know I got to go with this one. I did vote in yours. I do vividly remember in one of my junior year of high school history classes, I had a teacher that was talking about how there was somebody that was running for some local election, and I talked to him or whatever the week before and was like, hey, counting on your vote or whatever. And he was like, yeah, you got it. I'll be there. And then the vote happens and he's like, I got busy. I didn't go vote that day, not a presidential election, one of those type of deals that I don't fault people for. You look around, you're like, are we voting for a president? Are we voting for a governor? Okay. Oh, it's just school board stuff. I don't have kids in school. It doesn't matter to me, whatever. Not going to fault you for it. Anyways, he tells a story about like, I didn't go vote, didn't think anything of it. And he said, little ways down the line, I got a phone call from this guy being like, hey, I was counting on your vote because he lost by like a very small margin. These smaller communities and how this stuff can work is like from that day forward, I went and voted every single year, every opportunity I got. And that's stuck. That's what made me think right there. I was like, oh man, did I not vote for Drew and try and help him out there? But I did. So, because like the voting stuff, that's public info.
That is true.
Especially, it's easy now to do that. I don't know how you did it before, like computers and everything. I guess you could call and see, did so and so vote? Maybe that's how you ask. Now you just go to wherever that website is and you pop in, the person's name and birthday. Boom, you can go in there and see it. That's how I check to see how old my parents are sometimes. Instead of having to ask them like, are you 56 or 57? I go in and I change the year on like their, the can vote or whatever it is, to where it would show you like when you voted before, like sample ballots, your polling location. I just, until it shows up and it's like, oh, there's my mom. Okay, she was born this year. And now I know how old she is. It's gotten a little easier for knowing my dad's basically 30 years older than I am. So I don't have to do it for him as much anymore. But my mom, it gets a little hairy at times. So I need to go every once in a while and just see what's going on there. And, word to the wise, if you are a public figure in any way in Kansas, maybe sometime I have checked to see your voting options. So, yeah. It's just a fun fact.
I got nothing after that.
All right. I did realize apparently Colin Farrell was in an episode of Scrubs in 2005. So I've definitely probably seen that at some point, but couldn't tell you like what episode or something. I just know that I've seen all of them. So also, fun fact, Scrubs is where I probably got the first introduction to the name Elliot for a girl. And so that's why it was on the radar. And that's ultimately what ended up being the first name of my first daughter. So
there you go.
Yeah. All right. We'll get out of here. Went a little longer than I wanted to today. But Drew and I will be back in the ensuing days in probably the same clothes because we're going to knock out a bunch of them today. But we've got a recruiting update on Thursday. And then Friday, we're talking quarterbacks again. So fun shows on the horizon. We're going to get out of here and we'll talk to everybody again tomorrow.